Hello, I'm Margaret Kirkpatrick. As has been noted, I would also like to introduce Portia LaFarla, who is the co-author of the materials that I'm going to be presenting today. She's in the background. She'll be answering questions that are posted on the Q&A. So the CASAS intake screening process is not a new process. It has been presented for quite a while as a part of the CASAS implementation training. But recently we started looking at the tools that we really need to make most available to agencies to help their intake process and to help their students to their best next place for their educational goals. And so we pulled it out of the larger training, and now we have this standalone process training. The CASAS intake screening process is an optional, informal, non-standardized process. It's really different from the process of giving tests, standardized tests, and using scores and that kind of criteria. It looks at a more informal way of working directly with the incoming student, assessing their reading, their oral, and their writing levels right at the beginning of the process to make sure that their recommended next step is the correct one, to help the correct placement for low-level ELL and low-level literacy native language speakers. We want to ensure that we don't give those standardized tests to our students before that is the most appropriate step to take, before their skill level perhaps isn't high enough to achieve a valid score, and we give them an uncomfortable situation too early in their process. Because it is non-standardized and informal and optional, there is not a standardized certification training process in order to administer these instruments. It can be administered by the people who see the students first, the intake person, the testing staff. They have a more direct connection to the student and can make some assessment judgments based on the process of intake, the process that all of our agencies go through. The intake screening process manual has recently been reevaluated and revised, and it is now on our website. All of the materials that I'm going to be talking about today can be found at this website, the training and support under the intake process. And Portia is going to copy this URL and put it in the chat box. So the intake screening process really begins when the student first comes into the program office and is presented with some kind of form, whether it's their registration form, a screening form, all of the things that normally we give to students to fill out. They all have kinds of standard information, a name, a date, perhaps an address, all of this sort of thing which we expect as a part of our daily life. So what we would hope that the intake staff would be able to identify easily those of our incoming students who have a great deal of difficulty. They can't fill out this common kind of information. They either ask for somebody to help them, or they perhaps have somebody with them who fills this out. And so through our beginning now to look at and perhaps identify students who might need a little extra evaluation process to make sure that they have the next steps appropriately assigned. In this intake screening process, there are three levels that we would look at: great difficulty, some difficulty, and little or no difficulty. Through this first contact with our students, by looking at the forms that they normally fill out, if we were to see that they had great difficulty, they couldn't fill any of this out, they really couldn't read it, then probably the most appropriate next step for them is to not test them, to collect the demographic information and enroll them in a beginning level class, either beginning ESL or a beginning literacy class. If they have little or no difficulty in filling out these forms, and this is probably the majority of folks that we see, then they would go through the normal process. They would be given either the locator or the appraisal, depending if it's an e-test or a paper test, and then they would, from this placement, go into instruction. But those who have some difficulty, it really seems to be a literacy task that is beyond what they are capable of doing at this time, then those students could be looked at by looking at these informal documents that I'm going to be showing you in order to help evaluate where the next best place for them is. If they have some difficulty, the next three things are, there's an oral screening. This would be for ESL students only. And there are 6 questions. There's a writing screening, a short response to a paragraph, and a reading screening, which is 5 questions. All of these are informal. All of them are relatively quick. Although one would hope that you could find a quiet place so that they could be worked with individually and kind of out of the mainstream of activity. So the oral screening has a script. Even though I said it's non-standardized, there is a rubric here to give the assessor an idea of the adjustment of what does a 0, what does a 1, what does a 2 look like, and what are the scores that would be kind of coming as a result of their answers. If you'll notice, the script is really kind of a discussion of themselves. It's familiar topics. It's the sort of things that they would run into as discussion topics generally in their daily life. So these are not scary kinds of questions, but more of a conversation than it would be a highly specialized kind of interview. The intake screening for the writing is, as you can see, it's a short response. We would ask for 2 or 3 sentences. Again, nothing that would be unfamiliar to them because it's a non-standardized assessment. If you wanted to rework this question to make it a little more appropriate for the group you were working with, that's okay too. It is how your students would answer this question, because what you're looking at is how well can they write? What are their thoughts in terms of putting together sentences? Again, all of these result in a no difficulty, some difficulty, great difficulty response. And then the reading screening, and this is for those incoming students who have low literacy skills. There is, again, a script in the manual, and the script would give you guidance to say, for example, see the top figure, an A, look at the second line and identify which figure looks most like the top figure. And then, of course, in the second, there is a bus. Identify which figure is a bus. So as you can see, this is a very low literacy evaluation, and the entire document is in the manual. So what you also have in the manual, and I think this is just so handy to be able to follow the if then, if this, then that. From the initial screening, which is the look at the ability of the incoming student to fill out the forms that are given to them as part of their regular registration. The great difficulty guidance is to enroll them in a beginning literacy class. Some difficulty for ESL leads them to the reading and writing leads them to the oral screening, then to the reading and writing if appropriate. Little or no takes them into the testing situation. For the reading and writing, if it's a score of fewer than 6, you go on to the screening. If the score is 6 or more, you go on to the testing. With the great difficulty, and this is really where an agency can make sure that the student is put into the most appropriate next steps. With great difficulty, the beginning literacy tests, which are 27, 28. Some difficulty, they go into the test without instruction, and with no difficulty, they are given the level A test. You don't need the appraisal or the locator, because this process has been the same function as the appraisal and the locator, and the outcomes then follow that naturally. So these documents are all outlined in the manual. One of the things that I would encourage an agency to do is that even though this is not a standardized process, it is important to assure to be ensured that there is a common understanding among the staff that will be administering these instruments. So the definition of what does great difficulty mean? What are the indicators for some difficulty? What are the indicators for little or no? So that there's a common understanding among the staff, because we want to ensure that all of our students have the same outcome, that a student who comes in the morning does not have a different outcome than a student who comes in the afternoon, but presents the same skill level. So this kind of interagency confirmation of the definitions is important. And also I would suggest that teachers could be invited to participate, because they receive the students at the end, and they can give valuable input as to what these definitions mean early on. So in conclusion, I would say that the CASAS intake screening process is a benefit both to agencies and to students. It ensures that students aren't tested before they're fully ready, and that they have the most effective process to proceed to their educational goals. All of the materials are available on CASAS, and along with this flowchart, which I encourage as kind of the guiding tool. Thank you very much.